Do you think MSTR is now effectively bulletproof, knowing they could raise capital in the future in sort of this repeated fashion to service their debt and dividend payments if needed?
Yeah, it kind of feels like he can't. No matter how much he ATMs the stock, he just can't get it below a 1 MNAV, which is quite bullish too, right? I think. Look, I think that one of the things that we don't think about is the fact that this is the first time anyone has ever done this, right? This is not like this has happened before. I can't remember any gold treasury companies that were doing this. This is the very first time this type of financial engineering on an asset, on a scarce asset, let alone a digital scarce asset, has ever been done. So Team MSTR and Michael Saylor are learning, and they're learning fast, and they're adapting, and this is all really good. And so they figured out, okay, cool. There's a lot of FUD and probably a lot of questions from S&P and other debt holders and preferred holders that were saying, what happens if you can't service these dividend payments on these preferred products? So he said, all right, watch this. Now we have 24 months of of dividend payments in cash, and you can only do that when you've got 673,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And I think they're playing the game at the highest level here. It's the only and the most relevant treasury company in my eyes.
Yeah, and I think you had this idea about, you said you'd be okay with them as they go through the ATM using 90% of what they raise to buy Bitcoin and, continue to stash away the other 10% in this cash reserve. And I
100%.
think today with the
Yeah.
announcement, they did
It's
something
kind
very
of what they
similar.
did, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of what they did. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, it's if you understand the game, you can kind of see these moves coming, right? So, yeah, I think this is extremely smart. Let's say for every $100 million, they buy $90 million of Bitcoin and put $10 million in cash to pay for any dividends. I'm not mad at that as a shareholder. I think that's quite smart. So, and if that helps them get graded and everything else for the S&P, now you're looking at more and more capital coming in. And then, of course, if it makes the preferreds much more uh, palatable for the banks that need to, allocate capital into them, and more capital comes in, then that's even better.
Yeah, and I love what you said about this being the first time that something like this is done. I remember back in 2020, I told myself, the next time I get an opportunity to make an investment in, a company that's doing something new, that's, experimenting, really innovating, and has, a brilliant leader at the helm, like I'm not going to miss that. And I was essentially referencing, like, okay, like maybe I sold Amazon too early. Why didn't I buy Tesla? I was like, I'm not going to miss that. And I think the other key ingredient too is like something that, just mainstream media and, the consensus is generally like disbelief in whatever they're doing. And I think you have all those ingredients here in MSTR. Obviously it had a crazy run, but it's come back down now. So yeah, could be another great opportunity here.
To me, MSTR is a 10-year hold, right? When I screwed up because so I've been an MSTR holder since the very first day of trading after they announced a Bitcoin strategy pivot, right? So that was in 2020. I screwed up because when IBIT came out, I thought, okay, my initial thinking for MSTR was this is an ETF alternative, and it played that role really well until IBIT came out. IBIT came out, I thought, okay, I need to pivot out of MSTR, put it into IBIT because it's now served its purpose. So I took most of my position and pivoted into IBIT. And I was right for probably about 3 weeks, right? And then I was aggressively wrong for 3 months. And I had to figure out what was going on here and what Michael Saylor wanted to build here. And I did, and I pivoted back, but I'm still missing thousands and thousands of shares that I owned before. So it is what it is. You live and you learn.
Right, right. And why do you think they chose to incorporate the cash reserve when they did rather than anytime sooner? Is it just a matter of, okay, they're just learning along the way? Do you think Sailor didn't have this idea already? It's not like that crazy of an idea to establish a cash reserve.
Saylor responds really well to the market, right? He's ducking and weaving with the market, and so you know Probably because they didn't need them until these preferred products started getting taken seriously, right? He just did a tour of all the big banks that he's been posting and sovereign wealth funds and everything else. How do you know that they didn't demand this, right? They didn't say, right, you don't even have a secure cash fund, so I know that I'm going to get my dividend payments. And then he said, all right, that's not a bad idea. Let's do that. We don't know any of these ongoing thinkings behind the scenes. So he's ducking and weaving with the markets. And again, I've said this many times. Michael Saylor is the fastest thinking person that I've met in real life. I think he's completely capable and able to duck and weave with the markets, and that's what he's doing. I don't even know I can't even imagine what the next pivot's going to be. I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. But these preferred products are massive, and I don't think we've even started scratching the surface of what's possible with them yet. Especially STRC, which has become more and more interesting to me over time. And I'll definitely consider holding STRC at some point for my portfolio. It's not for me right now, but at some point in my portfolio, it may be quite useful.
Which one is that?
STRC stretch.
STRC. Okay, gotcha. I personally don't see risk to this as long as MNAV is above 1. But just to ask a question to hear your opinion on this, for MSTR equity holders, how much risk, if any, do you see from their continuous dilution as they continue to raise capital to ATM for either Bitcoin or the cash reserve?
Well, I'm a common stockholder, right? I'm not a preferred stockholder. I don't hold any preferred stock in MSTR. I like the common stock. So, for me, is there dilution? Yeah. Is there price movement going down? Yeah. But has Bitcoin gone down? Yes. And I try and remind people, like, MSTR, I said this on videos for over a year now. Like, MSTR is building a speculative platform on top of Bitcoin. What that means is you have to be able to speculate on Bitcoin through MSTR. And in order for you to be able to do that, to make it worth anything, it has to be more volatile than Bitcoin. Because otherwise you can just do it on Bitcoin now through IBIT, right? So in order to have any value to the market, it actually has to be more volatile than Bitcoin. Which is why implied volatility is very important for MSTR. So, and also that doesn't just mean to the upside. You actually have to be more volatile to the downside on Bitcoin to maintain value and position as a speculative platform. So what I mean by that is if Bitcoin went down 36% and MSTR went down 36%, I'd rather just buy puts on IBIT now, right? I'd rather just place short positions on IBIT now. I want MSTR to go down 70% when IBIT's down 36% because I can now place leverage short positions to the downside, and MSTR actually has some value from that point of view. So all of this that's happened is good. MSTR has to move more than Bitcoin in any direction. That's the key. And if it's not moving that, it will start to lose its speculative platform value, and that's when you'll see, price kind of stick very closely to the value of its Bitcoin. By the way, one of the things that he's already stated, but they haven't done yet, which I'm kind of excited for when the first time they do this, is they could quite easily ATM any of these preferred products and just buy the common stock, right? If the MNAV is below 1, let's say the MNAV goes to 0.9, he's already stated quite clearly that he's willing to, instead of, buying more Bitcoin, you just buy back the stock because that increases Bitcoin per share, right? The goal is Bitcoin per share. And so if he does that, right, firstly, you would have to wait until the MNAV drops below 1, but that now puts kind of like a sailor put on MSTR. And that's also quite exciting. We'll see when it turns out that that's the first time they do that.
Yeah, and like you said, MSTR, it's designed to be a levered play on Bitcoin and has historically tracked at about 1.5x in both directions. After everything we've seen and experienced over the last year and changed on this Bitcoin and MSTR roller coaster, has your thinking changed on whether you'd sell any MSTR after a new all-time high to either move that capital into Bitcoin or create your own cash reserve to, buy back the MSTR shares or even Bitcoin at a later time. Eventually when prices mean revert.
The thing is that I can do that because I live in Dubai and there's no capital gains tax, right? So I could happily do that. But what's the point? What are you going to do, right? Like, so actually, this is an interesting scenario of using like stretch, for example. If you think that MSTR has topped, let's say you're a wizard and you know that MSTR has topped and Bitcoin has topped, and it's now going to go down for 2.5 years. You could quite easily sell out of your MSTR common stock and just buy STRC. Now you've got your cash sitting at par value and you're getting a 10% a year yield on that cash, and you wait until some kind of bottom until you're comfortable, and you flip back into MSTR. So this is a interesting vehicle to use. I would argue that there's better ways to do it now, right? Buying puts is one way to hedge, right? You can place a short position. That's another way to hedge. There's lots of different things to do. I kind of worry always when it comes to quote unquote taking profits. What if we go through a period where there is this S curve of capital saturation, and so I would have to see a massive parabolic top here in Bitcoin in order to do that, because otherwise it's not really worth the risk. Would I buy puts? Yeah, absolutely. At some point I'll buy puts to hedge my position, but that doesn't involve selling the underlying asset.
What signals would you need, or what would need to be happening in order for you to be like, okay, now's the time to put on a hedge?
There's there's a few things that I look at, but the easiest one, again, it's not my thing. Raul Powell has said this, is looking at the PMI numbers, because it just happens that Bitcoin is perfectly correlated with the business cycle and the confidence numbers. So if you look at that and you buy Bitcoin under a 50 PMI and sell or hedge at above a 60 PMI, you've done pretty well.